Welcome to this week's episode. It is my honor to be your host, Dr. Katie Williams, with Dr. Williams LLC and the Dr. Williams podcast. If you want to keep this show up and running, please take a moment to follow the show, leave a rating and a review, and share it with somebody that you think would enjoy listening. This show is about highlighting what I consider to be the most valuable form of communication. And it's something we all have, whether we're tapped into it or not. That is, intuition. Let's jump right in and see how today's guest utilizes their unique ability to tap into their intuition and how they use it to serve others. Make sure to listen to the end to find out how you can work with today's guest. I am here today with Monica Maria Aparicio, and I'm super excited. She's going to do a reading for me. She is a prosperity mentor, and she's actually calling in from Colombia. That is the longest distance reading I have ever had, so that's kind of cool. Monica Maria, thank you so much for being here today. Can you give the audience an idea of who you are? Tell them about your business and what kind of reading you're going to do for me.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. And so hello to everyone. Hello to your listeners. As you said, I am a prosperity mentor. What does it actually mean? Well, I like to start by really talking about what prosperity actually means, which is to be doing well, to be thriving in all areas, including financially. So I mostly work with spiritual entrepreneurs by helping them see the big vision for the work that they're here to do. I love to use occult wisdom like astrology and other spiritual secrets of success, mostly so they can be super clear on who they're here to serve, how they're here to serve them, and to make that process as graceful, fun, and easy as possible.
Awesome. I love that.
Yes. And so astrology is just one of the tools that I love to use. The reading that we're going to do today, I call it an Astro-Intuitive reading. So we are looking at your birth chart, at your natal chart, and I'm overlaying on top of that a system called life path astrology, which basically focuses on your life path, your vocation. How are you meant to be fulfilling your purpose? What does it look like as you express it out in the world? Gifts that you have, talents that maybe perhaps you're not including, and really focusing on the ideal client archetype or the energy of the people that you're here to really serve and how to best serve them.
Awesome. So, and you tune into that intuitively also, not just by reading the chart. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. So astrology, I call it a master key code of information because it's layered. There's so many layers of information, just like the chakra system, which I find they know what it is, but they have such little information about it, and there's layers upon layers. So yes, a big part of it is reading it intuitively.
Well, I have had my chart done once before, and I'm really excited to do it with you because you're adding this extra element and going into it in a very specific kind of understanding way. So that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, and I also really love to share the screen. I'm very much a teacher. I was a teacher in the public school system of New York City. So for me, it's important not only that I'm giving you information, I don't just like to tell you, like, I want you to understand where is this information coming from so that you have a visual. I always make sure that my clients are able to see where I'm tapping in to tell you what I'm telling you. So should we dive right in?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay, great. So what we're looking at, it kind of looks like a pie with lots of like lines on top of it. And so this is your chart at the time that you were born. And everybody's chart is different. It really depends exactly on the time, the minute, the exact minute of the hour, and also your location. So what this is two things. One, it's a physical graph. It's a graphic of what was physically really there in the sky based on your location and your time of birth, but it's also a capture of energy. And it's the dynamic of energy between the heavenly bodies, you and the other heavenly bodies. And I say other heavenly bodies because we are a heavenly body. We are made of the same stardust as the stars, as the planets. So that's what it is. If I were to bring this down to earth, I like to use the analogy that this is somewhat like a diorama stage where there's different scenes that are moving through. And those scenes are these pie slices. What looks like pie slices in traditional Western astrology called the houses or the arenas of life, the arenas of business, of, of your purpose. And so there's different things that are going on in the houses. You're going to notice that there's some houses where there isn't much happening in those houses. However, there's always an energy present. So this is a map. And on the very outskirts of the map is where we're going to find the zodiac wheel, which is represented by the 12 constellations, the 12 signs, beginning with Aries over here. This is the first sign, and it goes around and round until it makes its way to the last sign, which is Pisces, and then it begins a whole another cycle. So this is fixed. This never changes. Like Leo is always before Virgo, which is always before Libra, and so forth and so on. What does move are the planets on the inside of this map. And there are other things happening here besides planets. The moon and the sun, here's the moon, here's the sun, they're considered planets. And as I was saying, other aspects, other things like this, looks like a little pair of headphones. This represents the North Node. This has a relationship to the trajectory of the moon. And I'll get into what this means. And there's also another aspect here that's not a planet, it's an asteroid, Chiron, represented by the little K over here with a little circle in the bottom. So I like to begin.
Now, when you say
Yeah.
that these things change in that one, are you saying that it's changing based on what today is or tomorrow or last week?
Yes, so this is going to be in respect to your time that you were born. So, for example, we just came out of, well, whenever anybody hears this, we have times in the year where the planet Mercury goes retrograde. I think a lot of people are familiar with that term, retrograde. So,
Yeah.
there's the planets are moving, right? Like there's movement, there's cosmic movement that's happening all the time. Now, the moon moves at a much faster pace than, say, for example, Saturn or even Chiron. Like Chiron changes every, I think, 4 to 6 years. I don't have the exact number right now, but it's something that we share generationally. It's about 6 years. The moon is shifting every two, well, really every day. You know, we're not seeing the same view of the moon. Every 2.5 days, it literally is shifting sign. It moves a lot faster than like even Pluto. Pluto takes a really long time to move, to shift signs. So like today, obviously this wouldn't be the same configurations. Every day there's a different configuration.
Okay.
Some
So
like
this is a
yeah, like
snapshot of the moment I was born where everything
yes.
was. Okay.
Yes, yes. And because we're heavenly bodies, it's a relationship between the cosmic heavenly bodies and ourselves. And we have everything that makes up the planets is living inside of us. The planets are alive within us, and each planet represents a certain aspect of our beingness, of our experience of reality, our experience of life, which is why I always say astrology is a master key code of information. To understand your chart is truly to understand yourself on a much deeper level and to
Mm-hmm.
have a map for your life and for your purpose. So, when I look at a client's chart, I'm really interested. One of the first places that I'm looking at is here in this area, the 12th house, which is this last slice. Now, the 12th house traditionally in astrology refers to the subconscious, limitations, limiting beliefs, limiting thoughts, sometimes past lives. It's an area where there are lessons that we have to get to heal, and part of healing those lessons or healing the karmic lessons that are in there, it is done by serving our people, serving the people that we're meant to serve. So especially for people who are entrepreneurs, are desiring to maybe start a venture, it's really important to know who is it that you're meant to be serving. And so we're
Okay.
going to find it in the 12th house, because the way that we heal the karma is by serving them, because as we serve them, we're serving a part of ourselves. So you can see that in your 12th house, we have two signs. And typically you're going to find a combo of two signs, sometimes just one, sometimes three. That would be the maximum amount of signs that you would find in a house. In yours, we have Scorpio and Sagittarius. We actually, your chart and my chart have a lot of similarities. By the way, when I first opened it, I was
Oh,
like, oh, yes. I also
that's
have
cool.
yeah, I have a similar configuration here. So like it makes so much sense that you would be having a radio show about the esoteric or the occult or inclusive of,
Yeah.
because Scorpio, and I like to say this, every sign of the zodiac wheel, if we look at it as a personification, if we look at it as a character, it helps us to understand that sign better. So, Scorpio as a personification, it's like an investigator. It's like it wants to really know the the real reason or the deeper reason behind things, like the workings of the universe. It's very interested in death because it knows that that's part of the process of deep transformation needed in order to really live a full life. There are always parts that are dying so that new aspects of ourself can be born. So that's Scorpio's vibe. Scorpio is like wants to understand the deep psyche, isn't afraid of doing shadow work, wants to really experience the depth of life. It like will be very, very bored just by superficial things.
Yeah, I do like to go deep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And part of the reason why you also like to go deep is because you're a Pisces. Pisces sun. So Pisces, like Scorpio, they're both water signs. They both have this like psychic ability to connect, like it's part of the spiritual gifts that they bring, is just like kind of like a knowingness, although Pisces is the very last sign, so they're super spiritually advanced, where Scorpio still has, they still have to go through Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius to finally arrive here. All of the signs were previously the other sign, like it's an
Oh,
evolutionary
okay.
process. Yeah. So Scorpio has that energy. Your people, I would say they're like 40% Scorpio and 60% Sagittarius. On the Sagittarius side, they are really interested in learning. So again, makes complete sense like why you would have these types of topics for the information that you're
This is really
sharing.
validating, I gotta tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good to hear. Like you're
Yeah.
on the right track. And this is why
Right. That's what it feels like.
this is why I also really love this, because especially for somebody that has a business, or maybe they're pivoting in business, and maybe it's taking a while to see to gain traction, it's like, okay, well, let's really look to see, are you speaking to the people that you're meant to be speaking to? And so you definitely are. Sagittarius, they love to learn. They love to consume information. Like they learned from Scorpio to want to really understand the universe. The difference between Scorpio and Sagittarius is, well, one, Sagittarius is a fire sign. So it's a lot more passionate and a lot more outward in the world, where Scorpio's a little more introverted and kind of like a loner. Sagittarius is excited about being out in the world and sharing the knowledge. Sagittarius is a teacher, it's a philosopher as a personification. It's also a spiritual activist. Like it really wants to do good, like see justice in the world, but not just through like the political side, but really about helping humanity deepen in their own spiritual understanding of itself. And it does that through the learning of different cultures, learning of different religions and philosophies, and it's all for the purpose of expansion of consciousness. So these are your people, like the seekers, the ones desiring the consciousness expansion.
I feel like I want to do a poll now and see, like, to my listeners, let me know what your sign is and see how many are Scorpio and Sagittarius. It would be really interesting.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. So it doesn't mean that your people will be the signs of. It means,
Okay.
yeah, it means that they will have the energy archetype, the energy characteristics of Scorpio and Sagittarius.
And that's something that would be in their chart.
It could be it. Yeah, I would say it would definitely have to be in their chart. Like I'm not. I have a Scorpio moon, and I'm a Sagittarius rising, but I'm a Virgo. However,
Okay.
I'm definitely a seeker. I'm a teacher. I have my own philosophy of the way that I see things, and I think that that is maybe it's always going to be a hybrid of what's in their chart. Most of us are really familiar with our sun sign, with the
Okay.
horoscope, but that's such a small little piece. The reason you're your sun sign is because of the month that you were born. So it's pretty general, right? And like I don't know if this has happened to you. Maybe you hear something about Pisces, like, oh, Pisces this, Pisces that, but maybe you're like, well, I don't know if that's really true, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not, right. It's not just the sun; it's also your moon sign and the rising. I think those would be the three most important aspects, or like the trifecta that really unifies the sum of a person. Would be their sun, their rising, and their moon.
So really just saying your zodiac sign does not sum it all up. You can't just put people in those boxes. It's a lot more in depth and complex than that.
Yeah, I mean, just even looking at this, you might be like, well, this looks like I don't even know what I'm looking at, right?
Yeah.
Like,
A little
all
bit.
these lines, like, what is all this? Well, and I'll get into that. So this would be, for anyone listening, if you can run your own chart. I actually like astro.com. And just very simply, if you were to simply look at your 12th house and to look at what's the percentage of signs, or even if it's just one sign, to understand what is that sign? What is that sign about? What is the energy that they bring? What's the personification? Like that's going to give you a lot of information. And this goes way deeper, right? Because say for example, if you really wanted to cater even more to your listeners, then speak to the secret desires, or the desires that haven't fully come up to the surface for them, which we're going to find across. So across from the 12th house, we're going to find the opposite. We're looking for the opposite signs of Scorpio and Sagittarius, which are going to be Taurus, which is the opposite of Scorpio, and Gemini, which is the opposite of Sagittarius. So this is the energy that they may not be fully aware of, or maybe they are to a certain extent. It really just depends on their own consciousness. So Gemini is, I'm going to start with Gemini because you have more of this energy than Taurus is what's needed to balance out over here. Gemini are the twins. That's their personification. So there's two brains, two sets of ideas. They are the communicators of the zodiac. Really interesting that, I bet you probably have a lot of people in your audience that maybe want to have their own podcasts or their own radio shows. People that
Maybe.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, like because they have this spiritual activism in them. And remember, they too, like, they love to learn because they're teachers. So they're needing to communicate their message a lot more. Where Sagittarius accumulates a lot of information, but they don't always know what to do with it. So, like, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but maybe even like hosting either a course or even like guest radio hosts day, something like that, or even like something to
That's a good
help them.
idea.
Yeah, like just something to help them organize their information so that it's living in a very on a platform that they can deliver to the world,
Yeah.
because they're interested in all these topics. It's not just because they want to know, it's because they're actually, and you have more Sagittarius energy than Scorpio, it's because they're also here to teach. They have a message that they need to give to the world, but they don't always know how to communicate it. And so since it's a gift of yours to, you're doing this, it's a gift of yours to have the platform in such an organized way, to know how to put together a show, to organize the ideas. It would be something that you could very well, if you wanted to, you could offer. Now, on the other side of what your people are needing is like step by step foundational structure. And so that's why I thought some kind of course, some kind of offering that walks them through a process where they can create a good foundation to get their message out into the world, because it's part of the way that they will fulfill their mission.
Would you like a solo hindsight episode related to this specific reading? If you do, send me an email at hello@drwilliamspodcast.com, and all you have to put in the email is hindsight and the kind of reading or my guest's name, and I'll know which one you're interested in. As I produced the Intuitive Wonderland, time went on before I actually launched it. So I have a unique perspective on each of these readings and how they played out in time. Most of these readings were recorded a year ago in the past. So I can offer my insight into the information that was provided to me and how the information has played out in time in my life. If this is something you're interested in, I'm happy to share that with you. Please send me an email and let me know. All right, let's get back to the reading. You're touching on a lot of things that, as I've been doing this podcast and these readings, I think you're like the 8th one that I've done. This is coming up a lot. A lot of intuitives are telling me that I need to be creating some kind of course. So you're validating that right now, and it's really aligned with the message I've been receiving.
Yeah, I mean, it's here. I always say it is written in the stars.
Yeah.
Literally. So, and then there's also, I want to talk about this Chiron in Taurus, which you have now. Chiron, as I mentioned, is an asteroid. It's called the Wounded Healer because it points to having had several lifetimes dealing with similar issues. And the issues are around expression, around feeling like safe, feeling maybe too sensitive to be fully self-expressed, feeling the need to know that you're safe in order to speak, especially as it relates to spiritual topics. Like there's a sensitivity, like a wound around, I don't know how that's going to be received. I don't know if people are going to laugh. I don't know if it's safe to fully express. Because Taurus is, it's the second sign of the zodiac. It's very earthbound. It's a hard worker. It knows how to create the foundation, but it's really about the material. Like it really knows how to work hard, but also play hard, like be in those creature comforts. And it doesn't talk much. Like, I don't know if you know many Tauruses, but they're not big talkers on emotion. The sign is ruled by Venus, which is the planet of beauty, but also intellect, the arts. Tauruses are like they need to have some kind of outlet for their creative expression because they're not always speaking. They need to have some way of communicating. It's usually through the arts. And so having Chiron in Taurus means that you're really good at supporting other people to connect in with that side of themselves that maybe feels a little tender and sensitive around being vulnerable, sharing what they feel or think, especially as it relates to spiritual topics. So I think that because you have that part of what the course can be can start with, and it's interesting that it's in Taurus because Taurus is also about the foundation. So really helping people hone in on what is the message they have to bring, and almost like they're them going through a healing process in uncovering the message and feeling safe enough to share it and present it out into the world with this Gemini energy, which is really about, okay, let's communicate the idea out.
Okay, so when you first started, you mentioned past lives having this kind of wound.
Yep.
Is that relating to me and my past lives?
Yeah.
Because you're also speaking to my audience at the same time, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so this chart is your chart, and I'm talking about you. However, your audience, most of your audience's energy lives in the 12th house, which also corresponds to your subconscious, unconscious, past your own past lives also. And we always work with people like us, and that's how we heal our own karma, is because we are of service. In a way, it's like as we help our clients, as you help your listeners, you're really helping yourself.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, what you're saying, I'm thinking about what I'm doing. I mean, I just happen to, I guess I don't just happen to be, I have a podcast which is spiritually based. So I am expressing very openly and vulnerably about my spiritual views. And in my chart, it's saying that I have past lives where there has been not a lot of safety in doing that. So this feels like maybe an overcoming of that. I'm breaking through and
Yes,
healing that. Okay.
totally that. And more importantly, you're adept at helping other people heal that sensitivity around not expressing themselves, or also feeling like what they have to share is valuable.
Okay.
That
That's
it that
great.
they're yeah, that it has worth. And it's really about embracing their own spirituality, like it would that's why it would make so much sense to create a course around start your own spiritual podcast, like something like that. I think it could be a really good segue for your people to even start building up an audience, so that if one day, if they are not yet in a business of their own, that when they decide that they're ready, that they actually have some experience with building an audience, with communicating with them and creating relatability. And so it makes it a lot much easier to be like, hey, and I have a service, that I have a product that
Yeah.
you can purchase.
You're giving me all these ideas.
Oh, good, good. Well, the other thing too is that, so usually after I look at the 12th house, I then skip, and sometimes I go all over the place. It just really depends on where I'm being pulled. Now, I usually go here to the second house where we're going to find this is in traditional astrology, it is the house of money and finances. And so, in this system of life path astrology, it is the way that we solve the problem that our clients, that your listeners might be having. So remember, some of the problem, and usually the problem is found over here. It's like, okay, I don't have a foundation, I don't know how to communicate. That could be some of their issues. Like, I have all this knowledge, but I don't know what to do with it, right? Now, for you, in your second house, you have Capricorn. I would say it's like 25% Capricorn, 75%, or 30%, 60% Aquarius. And so, again, as a personification, Capricorn is business. It's all about making money, creating a business, but not just for the purposes of being in business and making money. It's to leave a legacy behind for the world. And then the Aquarius energy is really about changing, being a humanitarian, changing the world, doing something for the world. So, like 100% your people, again, I'm really feeling the spiritual activist energy, the teacher energy, the philosopher energy, the desire to make the world a better place. Like, this is really, in essence, what you're showing, how you're here to really support them. So I think the show is such a great way. The show is actually a foundation, and it was a really important part of your own healing process, so that you can then step into a next layer of guiding your listeners, which is really helping them to be those bosses, helping them to leave behind their own legacy so that they can be of you're all being of higher service to the world.
I definitely do have that. I mean, I talk about empowering a lot. I want people to feel like they have everything within them that they need. They don't need anything external.
Mhm. Yeah. And it is important to first be grounded in that internal knowing, and then to take the internal knowing and have it materialize externally as a contribution, as a body of work, which is a lot of what this Gemini energy is on the opposite side over here of Sagittarius. And it's so interesting because you're a Sagittarius rising as well, right? So the rising sign, the way that I like to describe it is your consciousness is rising into that awareness of the energy of Sagittarius. And so what it means is that you yourself, as you've matured, people look at you, by the way, people usually will look at you more as your rising sign. Like, they look at you and they're like, wow, such a teacher, like such a, so well learned, so she has all this education, she brings all these guests, and they're from different backgrounds. Like, they're very culturally rich people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you like to travel.
I'd
um
love to
yeah.
someday.
Well, Sagittarius has, it's not just, it's physical travel, but it's also the traveling that happens when we read a good book and we're
Mm.
transported, or the traveling that happens, it's like, it's astral projection as well. If you're listening to such a rich program, watching something, that it can also take you there as well mentally. So this is very much the traits of Sagittarius. Sagittarius must feel freedom because it's here to expand its consciousness, and so it doesn't do well with limitations. It's a fire sign. So if you think about setting something on fire, it very quickly multiplies, like
Yeah.
fire spreads really quickly, and
Grows. Yeah.
that's the energy of Sagittarius. So I think that, I'm curious, how much of that energy do you identify with?
Um, I feel like I'm a little restricted, actually. I
Mm.
don't feel like I'm spreading quickly like wildfire. I feel like I feel some resistance that I've been trying to work on kind of overcoming.
Great. I mean, well, so I was going to say I think it's interesting that you're a Sagittarius rising because the rising is that we're moving into that energy. So there is a familiarity, I think, to some extent. And this aspect here, which is the North Node, now these come in pairs. So you have your North Node in Gemini and you have your South Node in Sagittarius. Now what this means is that you came into this lifetime already having had experienced a lot of these Sagittarius attributes. So like you've had other lifetimes where you were free, where maybe you were a gypsy, maybe you were a professor of sorts, like you know what it's like to philosophize. Yeah, like you kind of like you came learned it in a way, but it's interesting because it's both something in your deep past that you're now remembering again as you're ascending into the sign once again. And the North Node, which is what I was talking about here in Gemini, which I feel that you really have mastered, which is so the North Node always points to challenges that help us to reach our destiny. And they are more frequent challenges than, let's say, for example, Saturn in Scorpio. Saturn is like the big karmic theme of our lives, where the North Node are daily challenges that happen so that we can be like, oh cool, a little challenge, I'm gonna hop over this puddle and that's gonna get me closer to where I'm going. And you have it in Gemini, and Gemini, remember, is the communicator. And so with this role that you have communicating, it's like you've taken it on, right? So I really feel that for you it's interesting because part of, and I'm looking over here, part of why maybe you might feel that there's a challenge or like kind of like a restriction, if you can see these red lines here, there's one here. These are directly connected. It's your ascendant, which is the rising here, making a connection with the moon. So the red lines refer to tensions. The blue lines refer to more of like helpful aspects, where the red lines can be like, ooh, that feels kind of tough. And so the moon represents our inner world, our emotional world. And so, when you made mention of sometimes it feels like a restriction, one of the ways to address the internal challenges that we have is always to look at the moon, which I hadn't talked about yet. That other third aspect that, the sun, the moon, and the rising are the big three. The moon really shows us how we can nourish ourselves internally so that we're centered and balanced and feel that nourishment. Because if we're not nourished, if we're not centered, then we're not going to be motivated. It's going to cause weight. It's not going to give us like that light feeling to want to like leap into something, right? So it could be like what might be causing like some hesitation or feeling of like, I don't really feel that feeling of freedom yet. With the moon being in Gemini, I think it's really important to communicate to yourself. Like sometimes when there's so many ideas, also the Gemini is an air sign. So similar to air, where it's like it could just spread, it's everywhere, fire is everywhere, air is everywhere as well. So sometimes it lacks clarity, like it lacks focus, it lacks a point of focus. And so that could feel very overwhelming, like that's just too many ideas.
Yeah.
So one way to really support yourself when you have your moon in Gemini is to have conversations with yourself. Like, I would even say like pour pour a cup of tea for yourself and you sit down with yourself. Like imagine stepping into the highest version of you, or you invite the highest version of you to sit down and to be your best friend and have tea with you and just to like ask yourself for advice kind of thing,
I
where
love
you
that. That's a great suggestion for anybody, really.
it is, but especially for a moon in Gemini, because Gemini, again, remember, twins, two heads, two brains, two sets of ideas. Like there could be so many ideas, so much going around. And I think it's really about like you hearing yourself speak, like literally being like, okay, what's happening today? What's going on? What are you needing some support with? What's overwhelming you?
Does that also speak to, I've always been able to see both sides of something. I'm not super opinionated one way or the other. If I'm listening to somebody talk, I can see their perspective, even if it's in opposition to someone else who's saying the complete opposite of that
Mm-hmm.
person.
Well, that's because, so this right here, this line that's running across your chart, it's called the midhaven. So it's the middle of the sky point, and it has to do with what we are naturally always doing, like just a natural gift or talent, a skill that it's a way that we're contributing to the world. And you have it in the sign of Libra. Libra, again, it's the scales, it's justice. As a personification, it's almost like she's a queen, so she wants to be fair to everyone, fair to, her people. So she won't always take a side. She's an air sign as well, so sometimes one of the downsides of that is the possibility of falling into like people pleasing,
Mm,
just because you don't want to take any side. It's like, okay, I want everyone to be happy. But the
yeah,
ability,
that's
yeah,
me.
well, the ability to just like hold equality, like hold a fair space is something that comes really naturally for you. And I think it's something that you're always contributing into your show, because it's like you're presenting an idea. It's not necessarily an opinion, it's an idea. And there could be many different ways of looking at that idea. And so it's very rich and broad in its perspective.
Yeah, I do try to do that, and a lot of times I don't want to come across super opinionated and make people feel like they're doing anything wrong, because I don't believe that. I believe we're all doing everything right. So I do try to word things in that way. I also wanted to say, going back to what you were saying, that another thing that speaks really true is that I came into this world knowing some things from past lives that I had to remember. That's very true. When I found law of attraction in this life, it was like, okay, this is it. This is truth for me, and then I was able to speak to it as if I had studied it for a long period of time, when it's been just a little over a year. So there is some of that, I think, that I'm remembering, like you were saying.
Yeah, and in essence, we're all remembering who we really are. We forget because even just speaking on this current lifetime, there's so much that we absorb, so much information, so much of our upbringing and our schooling and society, and now even more so because there's so much media. There, I mean, we have our phone, we have our phones in our hands pretty much like every moment that we're
Yes.
awake, for the most
Yeah.
part, unless you make a conscious choice to like set it down or like, put it in another room or log off early. That I think sometimes we're not always aware of what's mine and what's being implanted, what's an idea that's
Mm,
being implanted in
that's
my
a good
brain,
point.
in my beliefs.
Yeah.
And we also, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that we go through things that might feel really painful and challenging in our lives, that in order to in order to protect ourselves and to continue moving on, we might like tuck it real deep in our psyche and forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is part of what I teach my clients, is that it's really important to have that soul remembrance, because when you do that, you don't give yourself the opportunity to fully process. And there's also a lot of power that is missing, hidden in those experiences, because it's painful. And so it's really important to have awareness, alchemize it, and then turn it into a source of power and a source of personal wisdom.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, I want to give everyone a chance to know how to find you. Is there anything else that I need to know about the chart, or are we good?
I mean, there's so many layers, but I think that's
okay. I feel like I got a lot out of that. And I just want you to tell the audience where to find you in case they want to have a reading of their own. I know you gave them a website where they can kind of run their own chart and kind of get their feet wet, but what about when they want to get into it and understand it? Then they can reach out to you for a reading. How do they do that?
They totally can. Yeah, so you can actually find me at the just psychologyofprosperity.com. There's a free training. I'll make sure that you have the link for that they can access, which is amazing. It walks them through my soul remembrance process, which is a type of hypnosis and regression. Astrology is just part of what I do. There's a lot of healing work that preludes the business development aspect of my work. But if anyone's interested in having specifically an Astro-Intuitive reading to get more connected to their purpose, to maybe have insights on their spiritual business or holistic or wellness business, or an idea they might have for it, I will send you the link, because I made a special savings coupon. So a link where they can directly access a 50-minute reading. They're normally $333. Your audience can get it for $222. So I'll make sure that they have that link. And then they can always just get the free Psychology of Prosperity video training also.
Is this a special offer just for this audience? Well, that's awesome.
It's Dr. Williams listeners reading.
Listen to that, guys. How sweet is that? Well, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you doing the reading for me. I feel like I have a direction in a lot of ways on where I need to be taking my focus. So thank you so much. And
you're so welcome.
Thanks for sharing it with everybody. And I'm also going to be doing an interview with Monica Maria on the Feel Good Now podcast, so you guys can hear that too. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Yay, thank you so much for having me.
That concludes today's episode. It is my hope that you found benefit in listening to today's guest and gained a greater appreciation for the guidance of intuition in each of us. If you haven't already, please make sure to follow us on social media under Dr. Williams Podcast. Look within, trust your intuition, and allow yourself to explore all the splendor that it has to offer. This is the Intuitive Wonderland.